let's get into it. So, yeah, I don't have a ton of experience with making good audio on Audacity. I just have good experience making just meme tracks for really random
shit
projects.
posts.
Just shit posts, exactly. So, this is an exciting endeavor. But anyway, we should probably introduce ourselves. I am Jason, and I guess we'll do my full name. I guess we'll do full names. We're not gonna dox
Make sure to
ourselves.
put your make sure you put your username in the middle, with the quotes. Jason
Okay.
Schwartz, was it? I forgot your last name,
Weiss.
honestly.
Schwartz. That's hilarious.
Weiss.
You went the opposite direction. Okay, so I
I was
am
like, I'm pretty sure I have a Jason Schwartz in my phone.
there you go. I hope we're right next to each other. So yes, I am Jason Wintermute Inc. Weiss. You'll probably find me on the internet there. I have a number of aliases. I'm trying to sort of condense them, but we'll get there. And I have a blog called useyouritems.wordpress.com where I write about video games, usually whatever comes to mind. It's trying to be a little bit more mindful and thoughtful about how we approach the media form and the content that we create there, particularly trying to avoid just like rampant shit posting in the sense of just tearing people down, tearing games down, tearing like the hard work that developers put in to create these things just for clout or content or for Twitter engagement, which I feel like often does happen in the space. So I'd like to just write more about it. And I was trained as a rhetorician in college, in grad school. I went to school for English and English education, so I spent a lot of time writing about books and literature, and I feel like there could be a lot more of that in video game writing as well. And I think there's really starting to be, and I'd like to be in that space. So that's a little bit about me.
Cool. And I'm Francisco Fantastico Martin, I guess would be my username. I also go online by Spanglish Fran as well. I'm trying everything to be Fantastico, but got a few usernames still around. I am a game developer by trade, software engineer specifically, so making games all over the place. Worked on Magic Arena. I've
Hell
worked
yeah.
on a few VR games. Yeah, I worked on a few games that haven't come out yet, and all that stuff. I do remember that I do have a blog post, actually, a blog, but I really don't post that much. I should honestly post more, and it's more technical. It's for the my game company that I will eventually release games under, Juegos Fantásticos or Juegos Fantásticos. So I think it's on juegosfantásticos.blogspot.com or something like that. We
Nice.
might cut this out. So, yeah, super excited. I think I am peaking a little bit on my microphone on Audacity, so I'm going to lower that a bit.
Yeah, I actually didn't check my Audacity peaking as well. I'll probably just rip it down a little bit to be safe.
Oh, there we go. Hey, there we go. Me too.
Nice. Cool. So today, I guess a little bit of preface. For 2023, I kind of restarted my blog. I had written in it quite a bit last year, and then I fell off the train, and I was looking for a project to kind of try and tie my desire to write more about video games together. And so I was inspired by Brendan Bigley and Stephen Hilger from Into the Aether, and they do bonus episodes, and they usually talk about whatever's on their mind or whatever games is really interesting to them or something that's particularly mindful or useful in the moment, or it's just relevant to their interests at the time. And something that stuck in my craw was this idea of like everybody has games that are super, super important to them gamers have games that are super, super important to them. I don't think Joe Biden has games that are super important to him, but so everyone has games that are really important to them, and I want to explore what makes those games so important to people, what makes it a desert island game for you, or what makes it something that is worth visiting again in 2023. I think there's a lot of nostalgia attached to these ideas, and I think that's perfectly fine and totally normal, and I want to sort of inspect that a little bit as well. So I made a list of, I think it's 25 games, and I sourced these games from my own notes, but mostly from my friends and colleagues that I know who have strong opinions about this. And today we're going to talk about Final Fantasy VII, which I'll admit is a game that I mostly added for my own sake.
I feel like once you said that, I'm kind of like a guinea pig because I definitely am on the nostalgia, emotionally connected to this game. I guess a little bit of background with Final Fantasy VII for me. I played this game or started playing this game before when I was in the single digits of age, like I think at like 7, 8 years
Mm.
old. I didn't finish it when I was that young because I didn't own it. It was at my uncle's place. So I was really into it. I really liked it, but I didn't have the time. I didn't go visit as often enough to finish it. But then afterwards, I actually got Kingdom Hearts. And Kingdom Hearts is my guilty pleasure. I'm not going to go off on a rant on it right now because otherwise that'll take the whole
We're
episode.
gonna get there anyway.
And that game really reignited my love for like all these Final Fantasy characters and really wanted me to play Final Fantasy VII again. And that was around the time that my uncle was moving off to get like a master's or doctorate. And he was moving off of Puerto Rico off the island. So he pretty much left everything. And he was like, hey, if you want anything, just take it. And I was like, sweet, I'm going to take Final Fantasy VII. And that's when I finished it. So I probably finished it pre-teens, maybe teens. Like,
Wow.
that's around the time that I finished it the first time. And honestly, now thinking back on it, I don't think I have finished Final Fantasy VII all the way until this playthrough again. And I guess that's something that we will get to as to why is that the case.
I think that's. I don't think it's that unusual either. There's games that I've restarted a number of times that I get to a certain point and I feel like I'm good. I reignited that passion. I kind of recaptured that original joy. I do this a lot with Chrono Trigger in particular, actually, where I get
Where's the point? What's the point that you're like, okay, I'm
usually
good.
once I get to, I would say, once I get through the distant, destroyed, dystopian future, is right about where I usually fall off, and it varies. I need to have Frog in my party, or I'm unhappy, and I love Robo. My preferred party is usually Chrono, Robo, and Frog. So once I have that, I'm pretty much, I've topped out. So
So what you're telling me is that Chrono Trigger, Frog good, Final Fantasy VII, Frog bad.
yes, exactly. Yes, 100%. Frog very bad in Final Fantasy VII. My history with Final Fantasy VII is very different, I would say. I never played the game. I had friends who had played it in middle school, I guess. So the game came out in 1997, right? I was 7 years old, and I didn't. If I had a PS1, I don't really remember. I'm sure I did at some point, and I didn't. It wasn't like in my wheelhouse. I wasn't crazy about RPGs at the time that weren't like Pokemon or even
Yeah.
Zelda, and I felt like I didn't understand it. Like there was some sort of hidden knowledge you needed to have to play Final Fantasy VII, or that why would I play the seventh one? I didn't play the first six. I
I'm gonna be so
I
lost.
how am I gonna be able to follow along that far in? I mean, I don't even Harry Potter hadn't even come out yet, right? And I remember a friend at a bowling alley during his birthday party showing me I believe it was the greatest hits copy. It was like, it had that neon, like electric green ribbon along the side where it says PlayStation, and it was a 3 disc, like, greatest hits copy of Final Fantasy VII. So it must have been, it was much later on. It was probably 5 or 6 years later from release. And yeah, I had never played it. My only experience with Final Fantasy VII is Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy VII Advent Children.
Oh, you watched Advent Children?
So yeah, it's I wrote about it in my blog post, but my first deep dive into Final Fantasy VII lore was coming home from a high school dance. It must have been like homecoming at 14, and I watched. It was the year that Final Fantasy Advent Children had come out, and I definitely torrented it because I couldn't afford it, and I didn't want to. I was like embarrassed to ask my parents to buy it for me, and I watched this movie getting home from the dance. I could not tell you what happened at the dance. I couldn't tell you like which of my friends were there or not. All I could tell you is I remember distinctly getting home at around 10, watching this movie with hot chocolate and a popcorn, just being obsessed, immediately obsessed. I was like,
Really?
this is the only this is the coolest thing I have ever seen.
Very much so. It is very cool. The fight scenes are very flashy.
That's all I cared about. I couldn't follow the story to save my life. I'm curious to rewatch it.
I am too, actually, because I don't remember a dang thing other than a really long phone scene where the
I love that
phone gets in a puddle of water and falls for like 2 or 3 minutes. Everybody is definitely hot
Oh,
topicked
yeah.
up where everybody's wearing black. Nomura really had his way with that
Oh
one.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember. I remember the fight. I remember Sephiroth. What do you want? The cloud says, "This is like, oh my god, what? Well, can we not get another recording of that?" It's like,
No, we had
it's
one
perfect.
take. Yeah, I was.
That is
I was
interesting.
obsessed with that.
I did not expect Advent Children to to make
Yeah.
it pop its head into this conversation.
In fact, it's probably one of the most important parts of this conversation for me because, like I had said to you, so my history with Final Fantasy VII is extremely vague. It's a pretty, it's an arguably hilarious but generally panned film that came out in 2004. An adaptation, if you can even call it that, of some of the
Yeah,
characters, namely who Aerith, Cloud, and Yuffie.
Tifa.
And Tifa,
Yuffie?
yeah,
Oh,
they're
I
both in
forgot
there.
that Yuffie was.
In
Yuffie
Kingdom
was.
Hearts
I'm
1
pretty
and
sure everybody's in there. Oh, in Kingdom Hearts.
yeah, in
Okay,
Kingdom
gotcha,
Hearts,
gotcha.
right? So in Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, those characters are in there. I mean, Squall's there too, but nobody cares.
Oh, Sid. Sid is
Sid is
there.
there as well.
Though Sid,
Which Sid?
fair to be fair, Sid. Yeah, Sid is in like everything.
Yeah, Sid's in every
So-
single one. I couldn't tell you which. It doesn't feel like the Sid from Final Fantasy VII, but I might just. be wrong
I
on
feel
that.
like it is very much like the Sid from Final Fantasy VII. It's just that he's more PG'd because obviously
Okay.
he curses left and right. He's a sailor. So I would say it's the essence. If you take away the swearing and the all that stuff, I think, and the abusiveness, which I guess we could get into later.
Yeah.
The Sid's abusiveness.
Yeah, that there's. I mean, it's a game from 1997. I think a lot of things aged pretty poorly, like many things in that time did.
I don't know how much we wanted to go into spoilers, but if we want even another perspective of somebody coming into Final Fantasy VII and Kingdom Hearts, my girlfriend also played Kingdom Hearts before Final Fantasy VII, but she played Kingdom Hearts relatively recent, like maybe the last like 5 years. So she had no nostalgia for Kingdom Hearts, she had no nostalgia for Final Fantasy VII, and I guess here's the spoiler alert starting, and I'll bring you back. It'll be just like 30 seconds to a minute. Is that she sincerely thought that Aerith's death was a fake out because in Kingdom Hearts she's alive. So obviously, if Kingdom Hearts must be canonical to the Final Fantasy VII universe, she has a bad relationship with media. I guess spoiler alert, gone. She has a bad relationship with media in that she never expects anybody is truly ever gone. She's like, if somebody dies, it's like they're just doing it to pull my heartstrings, but they're gonna be back.
Comic book stuff.
Yeah, she's been burned too many times to actually have any emotional attachment to any death because she's
Right.
like, they might be coming back. Who cares?
That's fair. I think it goes without saying that this is probably just a spoilery piece of content. It's
Fair.
gonna be kind of hard to deep dive. I
mean, it's
the
so
way
old.
that I want to without talking about it. So I think we can even. I'll restate it in a brief intro, but this will definitely be spoiler territory.
Spoiler-tastic.
for a game that's almost 30 years old. With that experience of not having played the game in my teens, really, and similar to your partner's experience of not of coming at it
Mhm.
with all of this itinerant extant media surrounding it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of the biggest games of all time. It's
I I honestly think it has affected me too. Like there are so many things about this game that has been fleshed out through alternate media. You have your Crisis Core, which when we talk about Zach's
right.
story, that'll become more relevant. There's Dirge of Cerberus, which honestly I don't remember anything. I absolutely that game has been erased from my memory. I played it all the way through and I don't remember anything that happens in that game. So whatever, I guess. Even the Final Fantasy VII, just the remake, which I guess will be the bookend of this conversation of like looking towards the future and everything. There's a lot of things that have filled in the gap that when I replayed it this time, I was like,
Mm-hmm.
huh, we don't really get to see much of Zach. Zach, like, as a character, is barely in this game. Like, and if you play this game, just this game, and think about Zach, you imagine, oh, Zach must have been kind of like a Cloud type character. And that's not true at all. Zach has a wholly different personality. So much so that I actually have, playing this the game this way through, I actually had a giga brain revelation that I'm gonna be sharing later on, but I don't want to share right now because it's too early. That's a little bit of breadcrumbs for the listeners for later on. So listen to the end.
Ooh. Oh, yes. Yes, dear listener, you have to stick around. That's how we'll hook
Sure.
you. Yeah, I think Zach's an interesting. I mean, we could just get into it, right? So it comes from this
Mm,
perspective of in alternate media,
mm,
Cloud's try hard, edge lord, doesn't care about
mm.
anyone, too cool for school. He wears zip up, sleeveless, turtleneck knit
Yeah.
sweaters and carries a big sword, and he's just the most ultimate dude. He's just like he's a he's
Yeah.
ex-soldier, he's a mercenary. He doesn't care about anybody. The opening of the game is him blowing up a power plant, right? So that he can
For money.
get
Not
paid.
even for any. Yeah. For
Yeah,
not.
just to get paid. Over the course of just the beginning of the game, the first couple hours, once you get away from blowing up the power plant in Shinra sector, I forget which one it is for or something, and rejoining Avalanche at the bar at Tifa's bar, you start to realize he's just a dork.
Yes.
He's a huge dweeb,
Yes.
and he kind of reminds me of he just reminds me of what I would be like as a kid playing it, like thinking you're super cool, like super in your head, and assuming like you know better than everyone else around you because you've seen some real crazy shit. But in actuality, Cloud's just like he's a dork with a really big sword. He's effective, but he is a dork with a big sword.
I think that is a huge thing. That is a crux. I think this is the crux of Cloud's character. Cloud has had a personality problem because Cloud from Final Fantasy, the original one, to all his external media is kind of different. Like Cloud in external media has been pretty much what we remember. It's a nostalgia Cloud versus the real Cloud. And by nostalgia Cloud, I mean this is the Cloud that you remember when you played Final Fantasy VII when you were 10 or preteen or whatever, because your social maturity isn't there
Mm-hmm.
yet, so you only see the cool character. You only see the guy with a huge sword, with a cool motorcycle you have a poster on the wall. You don't see the dweeb until you are much older. And I think that there was a huge disconnect back in the day. And this is me just with hindsight. I did not realize this when I was a kid because I was a dweeb, a social immature dweeb. There was a huge disconnect with Cloud as a character after Final Fantasy VII, where some people were like, this is a realistic character of a antisocial, bullied kid who didn't have many friends and therefore didn't have an opportunity to really exercise his speaking skills and his social ability. And the other side of things, where this is just a cool lone wolf type, oh, I don't need anybody, I'm super cool, and that's the character who has more marketing power, and therefore that's the character that later on in Advent Children and Kingdom Hearts and all these other games got reenacted. So a bit of a spoiler slash looking into the future. One of the reasons I personally am a big fan of Final Fantasy VII Remake is that they caught the essence of the original Cloud. I was worried that now that they're going to have voice acting, that this is going to be Kingdom Hearts Cloud, and this is going to be all these things. They did the voice acting and the directing and everything is really good in that you can tell that this is a guy who is a loner, is a bit edgy and all these things, but it's not because he wants to be, it's because he doesn't know how else to be.
Yeah.
And little by little on that story in Final Fantasy VII Remake, you can see him opening up little by little and becoming friends. And oh my goodness, I love it.
Yeah, I think that was absolutely my favorite part of playing Final Fantasy VII was just the unraveling of Cloud. And like you said, it's this sort of standoffish lone wolf edgelord type character that comes from a place of not understanding the sort of social cues and the social aspect of being in a society that's honestly fairly unwelcoming to outsiders. And I think that's the part that really stuck with me the most, was watching Cloud develop into not just the leader of the party, but the like de facto friend, the glue that sort of stuck everything together. I guess Aerith also plays a pretty big role in the glue of the party.
Mm. I think Aerith is the sparking incident, the that opens up Cloud. I mean, I think that there's too much history with Tifa and everybody else isn't a friend. So having Aerith, who is both a new person who wants to become a friend immediately, regardless of, I guess you can say, ulterior motives, kind of like bouncing back kind of deal. She is the important part that brings her together, and something that I think gets overlooked. There's so many discussions about Tifa versus Aerith and all these different things of like who is the OTP. I honestly, a relationship that gets overlooked a lot that I had not realized until replaying the game is the Barret Cloud relationship. That friendship goes through so many peaks and valleys and is so deep, and it's so good. I love it. He's such a good character. Barret is also a good character.
I do love Barret. I had a pretty deep concern with expectations of Barret, and I won't say that they were totally alleviated in playing Final Fantasy VII. I do think that Barret as a character is a bit of a black exploitation or a black exploitation stand-in. It's Square Enix does not have a good history with that character.
Having said that, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Leaps and bounds from their other black representation. Like making Barret a proud father, is such a beautiful thing. But yeah, I do agree. Let's give the black character a gun, and he swears a lot.
And he has a flat top haircut, and the whole thing was just not. I mean, the visual representation is certainly lacking. It's in line with, I guess, 90s media coming off of Mr. T in the 80s and things like that, and the pro wrestling scene, which I believe was big in Japan. I don't know if it was in the 90s, but it was in the United States.
If it wasn't Square Enix and if it were modern day, I would give them the benefit of the doubt and say they probably were doing it on purpose to kind of subvert your expectations and make him a much more deeper character. But
it's Square Enix.
you can't get around it. In the 90s, Square Enix,
No.
there's no way that they were subverting expectations.
Yeah.
They were just playing to the character,
I don't feel like
to
I need
the
to give any shadow of
stereotype.
any doubt or any credence to Square Enix. I mean, they don't
Yeah,
deserve it.
no,
They made
definitely they don't deserve it. They
incredible
do
things,
not.
but I mean,
They
Final
do
Fantasy
not.
13 doesn't fix the problem, and they had an opportunity to fix it. Again,
I didn't
a
even
proud
play it.
father, so they seem to get that part right. But then I don't know. I don't want to get too far into it, but I do love Barrett as a character because I think he does have this really interesting relationship, not just with Cloud, but with the rest of the party. So the thing that stuck out with me was Barrett is constantly struggling with what it means to be a good father and how to raise Marlene, despite honestly being absent for most of the game because he's saving the world. But it is
Yeah,
this point
yeah.
of, what do I have to do to ensure a future for my child? And at the same time, he's wrestling with the traumas of his past. That so much of my experience of Final Fantasy VII was watching characters with somewhat tragic pasts, but moreover, the takeaway I had was everything is riddled in this conversation with loss and losing something important, losing your home, losing your planet, losing your arm, losing your loved ones, whatever it might be. And it's this story of constantly losing something that's important to you and then rediscovering new things and new relationships and new connections that can either repair that previous trauma or in some ways just replace it, which isn't necessarily the correct response, but it is the response that we get. I mean, we see it in Yuffie's
Yeah.
side story. We see it in Aerith's story as well. The rediscovery in the live stream with Cloud. So I think Barrett's really great for this because it does give us a little bit of that buddy cop drama that you kind of want between Cloud and Barrett. And at the same time, I think he brings a lot of perspective to Cloud's character of just, I have to give a shit about this. I have to care. I have a child on the line. This isn't just the hero thing
Yeah.
to do. And that there's a moment, I think, I don't remember if it was on a train or not, but like Barrett has this like come to Jesus moment where he's like, it's not just about being cool and sticking it to the man and winning for winning's sake. It's like, I have something on the line here. Like, I have to do this for Marlene. And that was like such a great turning point from my experience in the game because up until then, Barrett was just kind of like the brash, cursing, like mercenary leader who's upset that Cloud's like stepping on his toes and things like that.
Yeah, he's the antithesis. Is essentially what Cloud needs to become, right? Like Cloud needs to become more. Cloud needs to give more of a shit.
Mm-hmm.
Barrett is always given a shit. I guess it almost feels like now thinking about it, like if Barrett had, I mean, I don't know. I haven't thought too much about this, so this might be a hot take. I wonder if Barrett dying would have been as impactful as Aerith dying. Like having the leader who has always been like, we need to do this, we can do it, let's pull through, let's whatever. I don't think it would make an impact from a marketing standpoint because, unfortunately, tropes of damsel in distress and the love interest dying will have a more emotional impact to preteens. But as an adult, now thinking about it, I wonder if Barrett dying instead of Aerith would have had a more emotional impact from like thinking about I'm a sucker for father-daughter stories, especially where the father like passes away. I'm not gonna. I was about to give examples, but I do not want to give examples because that'll be spoilers for other media. I'm a sucker for those stories. I wonder if how much of an impact that would have made.
I wonder the same. It's interesting because that's gonna kind of lead us into the titular
To the big one, the titular
scene.
spoiler.
But Barrett as a character, I think he's maybe the only one in the party who really stood to lose anything. Tifa was going to lose Cloud and the bar, and arguably Marlene. She seemed to be sort of like an aunt figure to Marlene in many ways. but I feel like Barrett really stood to lose the most. Kate Sith, not really. An interesting character we can get into. I have opinions. And I'm trying to think. I mean, Vincent, I don't know what he stands to lose.
He already lost everything. He
Exactly.
speaking of Cloud being an edgelord for edgelord like dweeb whatever, Vincent is the edgelord for edge. Like yes, he's lost a lot and everything, but he's got over 100 years or like whatever many years to get over it. Like
you find him sleeping in a coffin in the ruins of a mansion in Nibelheim.
it's like get over yourself, dude. Come on.
Once you meet Vincent, and even if then later on if you go to recruit Vincent, I feel like you can no longer say Cloud's just the edgelord character because he's right there. Vincent's right there.
Do you think
in red and black with guns?
Do you think that they did that on purpose? Like they were like, you know what? We need to add in a character who is the antithesis of Cloud. Well, not the antithesis. Is the you imagine this to be Cloud, but you think that's what Cloud is? We'll show you what you think Cloud is. We'll show you what you think an edgelord is here.
I feel like it could be. It really could be. Vincent's such a weird character. He comes in so late in the game, and he's such a one-trick character. I didn't spend a lot of time building him out.
Did you get him before or after Sid?
Ooh.
Because I think Sid is if you get every optional character as soon as they become available, Sid is the latest one. But I have Vincent is such an obtuse way of like unlocking that I the first time I played it, I got him after Sid. Like
I think I got him before I got Sid. I feel like I got everyone as soon as I could.
This playthrough I did as well.
Yeah, I used a guide for a lot of it. For whenever I got stuck, it took me a little bit longer than I wanted to complete the game. So I am a firm believer in the liberal use of guides, especially
that's fine.
For old games when you get to dig through like old game FAQs forums. That's the chef's kiss. That's the beautiful.
The monospaced, monospaced, no editing. For me, I mean, this is like a hot take for not even a hot take. It's for game guides. I think game guides are good. Use game guides, whatever. A good game guide won't give you story spoilers, though. Like, if a good game guide is telling you, like, it's difficult to write a good game guide, and it's even more so difficult to give a good game guide that is being a supporting guide to help you with the game rather than just telling you how to do everything. Because that latter one where it's just telling you to do everything, I'm kind of iffy on. But if it's a game guide of like, hey, by the way, there's items here, there's things over here. Oh, a strategy is to do this. And then you remember that strategy and you're like, oh, I can use that strategy later on. And I don't need the game guide later on. Those are the good game guides that I really like. Once the game,
I feel like there's maybe a later episode here for us when where we play through Tunic and we get to talk about game guides, because I do feel very similarly. I have deep rooted core memories of begging my parents to buy me like Brady and Prima guides at Best Buy and Barnes and Noble, and and I have like the ASCII formatted text documents on game facts that you download that are like 50 kilobytes, but it's 400 pages of content that 12 people made. It's just like, it's really a lost art.
It really is. Game facts. We need to bring you back. I never had the luxury of buying game guides. A bit of background, I guess, here. Quick background is that I was a overweight kid growing up. I am still an overweight kid right now. But I was an overweight kid, and my parents were very much they weren't against me playing video games, but they were very hesitant in encouraging me to play video games. So I didn't have that many video games growing up because they were hoping that I would play more outside if I didn't have as much media to
Right.
consume inside. So, so yeah,
Hmm.
any money that I would get from my parents for video games had to go to video games. It couldn't go to like video
Right.
game toys or video game like guides or anything else.
Right.
Just because it was very, I needed to use my money very wisely in that sense.
Do you think that impacted your decision
Oh,
to become a
totally,
game developer?
100%. My parents, I mean, they meant well, but they were very much the type of parents that were kind of like, no, you can't go into game development or any artistic endeavor. At one point, I wanted to be a film director or a graphic
Mm.
designer. I was always really good at math and science, which is one of the reasons why they wanted me to go more into engineering and stuff like that. And one of the reasons I became a software engineer was because I was like, this will make my parents happy. It is a good degree to have if my dreams of becoming a game developer don't pan out. But at the same time, I'm going to quietly
Hmm.
be making games. And in the background,
Right.
just so yeah, they won't never know. So I mean, it all worked out. So
Right. Yeah. No, it's certainly interesting. How we end up at these
yeah,
places in our lives, and it's curious to me to hear that you were sort of
hmm,
limited to games as a child growing up by your parents who were in all
yeah,
respects
yeah,
trying
yeah.
to
They
do
were
the
trying to
right
do the right
thing
thing.
and figure out what the how do we make sure our son's successful, and then you're like, well, I'm gonna make the thing that you didn't let me have.
Yeah, and I'm gonna make a lot of more kids be lose overweight. Just,
Yeah.
uh,
Well, I think
yeah.
I don't know about that part, but I think bringing joy to a lot of people's
Oh
lives
yeah,
by making
it's
games is an extremely
yeah.
worthwhile endeavor. You could be selling mayonnaise like some of us.
Speaking of
So,
which, do you have some
dear
mayonnaise
listener, we'll
that I
save
could?
that for. I actually moved it for the guests that I moved it for the guests that are coming later today. So, yes, dear listener, we can talk all about my endeavors in the
Can
wonderful
we
emulsion of mayonnaise in later episodes. I
Patreons
hope
that
not
hit our
I pray
$50 get mayonnaise in the
Yeah, yeah. Our Patreons will get my diatribe on mayonnaise. Anyway, let's
Yes,
Final Fantasy VII.
yes,
That's why we're here. So, right. We left off. We were kind of talking about Cloud and
yeah.
Barrett. I think that leads us to the party in
Hmm.
greater respect and the party as a whole. I'm really
Yeah,
attached to the characters in this game. That's what kept me here. I did not like the battle system. I
really
really hated
interesting.
it. I really did. I have a strong dislike of it. And coming from like I'm not like alien
Mm.
to Final Fantasy games. I've played Final Fantasy 1, Final Fantasy 2, parts of Final Fantasy 3. I've played through 4. I played through parts of 9, all of 10, all of 10 2.
Wow.
I've played Final Fantasy games. I've finished most of them. 12 I also played. 14.
And just to be clear, when you say the battle system, do you include the preparation like materia system and oh,
Yes.
interesting.
So yeah, let's talk about this rather than we'll save the party stuff because that's maybe juicier. Um, the ATB gauge sucks.
Hmm.
It sucks. That is my hot take. It is trash, and it is extremely unfun to got by not having slow available yet, or not casting haste, or haste fell off, and so now I'm acting like slightly behind. Like it's a system. I
Hmm.
think that they very much were trying to capture the feel of real time action fighting, and this I think was a very worthwhile attempt. I think it was a great execution, attempting to solve that necessary problem of how do we make turn-based
Hmm.
combat more fun, but it's still too turn-based.
So correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure the ATB system has existed before Final Fantasy VII. It's just that Final
I believe
Fantasy
so.
VII is the first one that showed the bar timer. Like I believe Final Fantasy 3/6 also had an ATB. It's just that they didn't show it to the player. They didn't show you that hey, your move is coming up. It just tells you hey, it's your turn now, kind of deal.
I believe you're
Okay,
correct. I have not played 6. That's also on my
okay.
list for this year. And 3, I did not get very far into, which would check out
Well,
by
I'm talking
by
about
that logic.
the numbering system is all over the place. Three, Final Fantasy 3 in the U.S. is 6 in Japan. Do you know about all
Okay,
this?
then yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
I did because they came out. Yeah, yeah. So 6, then I have not played, but it is on my list. That's a job system
Okay.
game, I believe.
I
I
believe
think that's
so.
Bart.
Yes.
I might be wrong. Don't. We'll talk about it at a later episode.
I I have not played most of these games either to completion or since I was, or if I played it to completion, I was in
Yeah.
preteen, so I don't remember much about
But yeah, so I did not like the ATB system.
it. Interesting.
I felt like I was getting got too often by getting looped, like getting death looped. And part of this,
Hmm.
I will admit, is the way that I built my party. I had a specific goal in mind when I built my party, and I admit that maybe I could have diversified my portfolio more. And I think that's maybe what the developers were going for. But I was
Hmm.
talking to a friend of mine who said, "Hey, did you know that Cloud has the highest magic stat in the game?" I was like, "Cool, you're my mage then." Because that seems antithetical to how the developers really planned on it being built. So I just gave him every slot I could, every materia slot I could, every summon, maxed out my all my mage spells on him. Eventually, by the end of the game, I did split him into healing as well, and then I gave Tifa healing as well. So I did learn my lesson, but I refused to have it in set mode. It was always in active because I feel like that's kind of what the I thought there was an option where you could set it where like you get to do your move before the next person does, and
Hmm.
I felt like they wanted it
Yeah.
all to be happening at once. They wanted it to be an action movie. Let's
Yeah.
play it that way.
Yeah.
So I tried to take them at their intention, and I did not enjoy the battle system.
Interesting. I I am somebody. I feel like Final Fantasy. I enjoy the battle system. The ATB system I could give or take. The materia
I think
system I
materia is
love.
cool.
I think the materia system is kind of like a deck of
Mm-hmm.
cards. It's just kind of like it plays to my magic sensibilities of like trying
Doesn't
to
play to your Final
make different
Fantasy VIII
decks.
sensibilities.
Oh, I didn't play Final. I didn't. I played Final Fantasy VIII for like 30 minutes to an hour, and I was like, "What is? I need to draw magic from the enemies to cast magic. This is BS. I'm
Yeah.
out." And I didn't finish it, so so it does not play to too much to that. If anything, I would say that the materia is dated in that it's very. I wanted it to be more of a deck building system. I wanted it more to be like, can I save like configurations so that way I have this one be my cloud magic configuration versus my cloud bodyguard configuration and all these different
That would have been
things.
cool.
But it's it's an old game, so they probably didn't think they were the development of Final Fantasy VII is pretty well documented. It was all over the place. The
Yeah.
ATB itself, I don't have. I could give or take. I don't dislike it. I don't think that it adds too much in this game. I will say the ATB in Final Fantasy Remake is core to how I love that game. Like I think the ATB they got it. I think Final Fantasy VII
Mm-hmm.
Remake is the
Yeah.
best action RPG battle system that we've gotten from a you have your Kingdom Hearts where it's trying to like have this menu while you're playing and all these things, but it's like I'm just gonna have shortcut magic, and that's all the magic that exists to me in Kingdom Hearts. I'm never going to be going through the menus to
Right.
try to find that other magic. Nino
Hell
Kuni
no.
is another game where they're trying to do this, like you're moving around, and sometimes you got to go through menus as you move around. I don't like it. It's just too much. You can't do it. Final Fantasy VII Remake is the
Right.
best, and not just best playing, but best looking. And I guess I'm gonna cut myself off here because this is not a Final Fantasy VII Remake discussion. But I will say the Final Fantasy VII Remake, ATB,
It's in
love it.
conversation though.
If we get to Final Fantasy Remake later on, I would
Yeah.
love to talk a little bit more about it. But I'll cut myself off here.
Yeah. Okay. Fair
Mm,
enough. Yeah, I think I mean I can tell what they were going for. I did enjoy there were times that I did really enjoy it, but my overall experience was just feeling like I would get death looped in a boss fight or a particularly difficult enemy fight, especially in the northern caves at the end of the game. And I guess my bigger frustration with it was I didn't feel
mm,
like it was really in my favor. It wasn't like in the favor of the player to manage the ATB system. It really felt like I should be jobbing it as
mm.
quickly as I can with haste magic on my party, slow magic on the enemy, and try to nullify their number of turns versus mine as opposed
Uh,
to go ahead.
no, you finish your statement. Something to add on to that.
It wanted to be super interactive and also very like visually
Mhm,
cinematic feeling, and I don't think it really captured
mhm.
that because there were times where I'm also just watching a frog dance
Get
around waiting
nay-nayed.
for its ATB gauge to fill. Yeah, exactly. Doing like a little truffle shuffle. I'm like this isn't what I'm here for, but I mean, yeah, I maybe this is just Jason's bad
Did
beats.
you
I
play
don't know.
most battles with the three times speed?
Only when I was
Only when you
grinding.
were grinding. Okay. Be-
I learned my lesson the absolute hard way a few times where and for the listeners who aren't aware, the re-released versions of Final Fantasy VII, many of them I played on the Xbox version, and I believe the Switch version also has this as
Mhm.
well, where it has I think it's basically like an emulator that loads the
Yeah.
game, and it has emulation abilities on it where you can speed up the gameplay. It has like a cheat mode
Mhm.
built in where you can move the game at 3x speed. You can always have full HP, full MP, and a full limit
Mhm.
bar. You can turn off random encounters,
Yeah,
and
those
I
are
don't know if there
three. Those are
was
the three things I think.
yeah.
Mm. Be-
So I did use
Me
3x
too.
speed.
Me
I
too.
used it quite liberally. Managing like traversal is
Yeah,
not the fun part
definitely,
of that game, so I didn't
definitely not.
mind. I didn't mind taking time away from that.
Because I will say
But
something that kind of
yeah,
sucks about the three times speed is that in whenever you're playing normally, if you leave X pressed, it'll automatically, as the bar fills up, it'll automatically attack for you.
I did not even
Yes,
know that
if you
was
have it
an
at three
option.
X speed, it doesn't. You have to click X. So it does
Right.
for characters like Aerith and your mages. It kind of sucks because you do have to go through the menus. But for characters like Barret and characters that are just going to be attacking, it Vincent,
Vincent.
it's great. You just hold and press, and it just
Yeah.
does it. I guess this comes into. I guess I want to go back to the fighting thing because I know that you have a lot of thoughts on this, and I'll let you go on a rant because I'm going to go to the bathroom really quickly. Selecting your target.
Oh my
I'll be
god.
right back.
Oh my god. Yeah, so I have a real hard time with selecting your target in Final Fantasy VII. For those who aren't aware, it is basically a 3D space that a fight takes place in, and it's set up my party's on one side, the enemy's on another side, like a traditional RPG would be set up. However, the cursor is based off of where the camera is, which would be fine if the camera was static. However, the camera is not static. They want it to be a dynamic cinematic experience. So the camera pans and rotates and zooms in and zooms out of different characters as they act, of enemies as they act, as things happen on the field. It'll pull back, and your cursor will, like all games did back in the 90s, is based off of where your camera is. I'm sure this is a function of how cameras were developed in games at that time, but the cursor doesn't stay where you want it to stay because it's based off of where your camera is pointed, and you don't control where the camera is pointed, the game does. So there's a number of times that I've healed the enemy, I have cast bolt 3 on my party, I have cast a res on an enemy which does nothing, and I've slowed my party, I've hasted the enemy, I've de-barriered my party, and it's just, and or my favorite, the one that really sent me through the roof and made me want to, and really upset me, was I would use a Phoenix down on a character who was alive because their character frames were in the view of the camera basically overlapping each other, and the cursor barely moved between what it was pointing to. And
I will agree with you.
it is not a good execution. All they
Was
needed
a
to
menu.
add was, at least for party targeting, just whatever the cursor on the screen's pointing to, point to it on my battle menu on the bottom at the same time. That's it. One more cursor, I'm good. I don't care about the enemy targeting, because it really just turned into how many all targets can I equip, because the game did not punish you for
Yeah.
all targeting, which is a different story, but targeting was a bit of a mess. I think it could have been a little bit more efficient, but like you said, I know that there is an extensive development history with Final Fantasy VII, all the way up to Nintendo swearing Square Enix off and all of this sort of stuff. So I'm not surprised. I'm honestly impressed at how effective the materia system and how effective the battle system is, in spite of the development roadblocks the game went through.
I'm gonna be less charitable than you. That one was not a like that one. They wanted it to be more cinematic. They were on their own fumes a little bit too much on that one. They were like, "Oh my god, we can have this really cool." So, dude, you've made 6 games already, which was just menus. Sometimes a menu is just the best thing you can use. And they went back to menus for selecting like who are you gonna be affecting,
Yeah.
because it was just easier and better. I think that one was they worked harder for a worse experience. And granted, 3D games, it was the Wild West. People didn't know what was good and what was bad. But that one I think would have been really quick to realize, oh wait, this is a mistake.
Yeah.
Unless they designed it with that in mind,
I
of like, oh, they'll Phoenix down the opponent a few times and it'll be great.
Oh my god. The number of times that I like Phoenix down. I mean, and this comes back to the ATB system, where it's like you're one of my favorite experiences in RPG is when you're very evenly matched with the boss, and it feels like there's a real back and forth of I could lose at any moment, I could turn the corner at any moment, because to me the experience of playing an RPG is twofold. I'm winning battles that I shouldn't because I have a good strategy, or I'm at parity with battles, and so I feel like there's a good
forth, yeah.
there's a sense of me succeeding. And then there's the power fantasy, where I'm so deeply overleveled that I'm just blowing things up. I'm hitting things for 99999 damage. I'm casting ridiculous spells on like tiny little
Frogs.
like enemies or whatever. And I think that there's a balance there that makes it cool, but the battle system didn't yield great results of I'm at parity. I'm just close enough to beat Sephiroth, to beat the Black Dragon, to beat this, but I got by the haste fell off Tifa, or slow fell off the dragon, and I use my Phoenix down, the only resurrection item in the game that still only resurrects for 300 HP at the end of the game, and I couldn't get my X potion to them fast enough on the backswing to heal them back to full, and then they do the AoE, and so like there's a lot of death loops that I experience at the, I would say, halfway point on, probably somewhere around in the middle of disc 2 on is where it really sort of stepped up. And I think that's probably the point when I went from being a little over leveled versus the game to being probably at level, if not a couple levels below, which is generally where I would rather play an RPG. to get to have the most experience, but it just at some point I just remember being in some cave somewhere where you just fought like a dragon in a hallway, infinite. It was after you get the
Hmm.
black materia,
Okay. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
and
Yeah.
there's a hallway, and I just grinded like crazy in that hallway. I put on 3x, I locked in infinite limits, and I just let the I found as much I just spent as much time
I'm
getting
trying
XP
to
as I could.
remember because I what did I do? So because I felt like this playthrough, I honestly was never. I always was at a spitting distance to beat the opponent, until I got to Sephiroth. Sephiroth was the only one where I had to go back and be like, I told myself I was never gonna grind, and I never technically did grind. But I did say I will do side stories as my grinding. So I'll do Yuffie's side story as my
Uh-huh.
grinding. I'll do get this item as my side story and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And it honestly was a little bit too much because I went on a few different. And the problem was that since I told myself that, I saved all the side stories until the very end, and I didn't realize that you can miss
Yeah.
Yuffie's side story. Like I
Yeah.
didn't lose. I lost my materia, but I reloaded my save state because I'm like, I'm not gonna do that side story until I need to, and it just never came. And then I just missed it, which is sad. I'm gonna be very vulnerable.
That was a
I'm gonna
great
be
side
very
story.
vulnerable here. As a kid, I wasn't a Tifa or Aerith person. I was a
You were a
Yuffie. I was
Yuffie
like,
person.
yo, Yuffie's so cool. She's like a ninja, and she's like a thief, and she's
Your crush
playing
was Yuffie.
around. She's spunky. I like her. Like, I don't. A lot of people hate Yuffie,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't. Like, I think it's not to get into politics or whatever, but it's the whole, is stealing a moral, like morally
Right.
always morally wrong? Is it like, and I'm like,
I
not
don't think it
really.
is either, but
Not
Yuffie's
really.
story was really good, and I liked. Was that wasn't Junon? That was
Uh,
I can't.
God, what's the
It's
name of
I think it starts with a W.
the island?
Wu Tai, thank you. Yeah.
Wutai.
So I really like I
Yeah.
stumbled onto Wu Tai. I was flying around. I saw this town. I was like, this looks cool. I need to buy some items. And then I walked into her hometown and her side story, and I thought it was great. It was so silly and irreverent with the Turks. I loved the Turks to death. That was my
Yeah.
favorite part of the entire game. Was anytime I got to mess with the Turks.
Turks are Turks are the prototypical. They were Nomura was starting to test out
100%,
Organization
100%.
13
I
with the
wish there was
Turks.
more Turks DNA in Organization 13 because they were all a little too hot topic. But that being said, Axel was the best by far, and we all know that. But anyway, yeah, I love the
Yeah.
Turks to death. Absolutely loved any sequence with them,
Mm.
and Yuffie's story was just really heartfelt because Yuffie felt like such a great foil, such a great mirror to Cloud's character, where they're both inept due to inexperience, and Yuffie's inexperience comes
Mm.
from Shinra's, basically colonialism
Yeah.
and her age,
Yeah.
and Cloud's
She's
came from Shinra's colonialism and I mean, and
Mm.
Hojo. But
Yeah. It's Cloud is a character of a tragedy through colonialism, but a success of colonialism propagandizing the people that they colonized, to make them feel like the bigger, like, oh yeah, Shinra's great. They colonized us, but everything is better under
are
this
you saying this about
colonial
Wu Tai?
control. While Wu Tai, no, I'm saying that
Cloud.
about Cloud
Right.
and Nibelheim. Like he becomes like his propaganda worked on him that he wanted to become a soldier. I want to become super cool
Yeah,
because
and
Shinra's
let
great
it let
and all
it
these
let it
things.
be known.
While Wu
We are
Tai,
not supporters of colonialism.
when I say success, I don't mean success as in a good thing. I mean success as in they succeeded
Right,
at
yeah.
doing the
And
horrible
yes,
thing.
I think Nibelheim is that
um,
is that
yeah,
100%.
and Wu Tai is the opposite. They failed.
Yeah, and I mean Junon plays into
Um,
that as well, in terms of like the port town. What's the name of the seaside resort? Yes, yes,
Costa del Sol.
exactly. Costa del Sol was great because it's like it's very much a game that's in conversation with its time period.
Hmm.
Ironically, it's a 90s post World War II Japan commenting on what it sees, I think, American imperialism looking like in, especially in the
Yeah.
90s, especially, post Cold War American imperialism, whatever you want to call it.
Hmm.
And it's a really interesting example of how Final Fantasy VII, I think more than a lot of other Final Fantasies at the time, was really encapsulated in the world that it's being written in, and in
Yeah.
the current events of the times, with like you were saying, with Wu Tai and Nibelheim and Junon and Costa del Sol all being these colonial cities, these colonial or these colonies, I guess, of Shinra Corp.
Yeah.
Yeah, of
Of a
Shinra, of not a
corporation,
country, of Shinra Corp.
which is
And
yeah.
you have this experience of these different examples of it in a time when post colonial, post Cold War, American outreach was very real. You grew up in Puerto
Yeah.
Rico as a prime example of this.
Yeah. Puerto Rico is definitely I mean, let's want to get a little bit deeper in it. It's kind of like Wu Tai in that United States tried to stamp out Puerto Rican culture. I wasn't alive for it. This was before my time, but essentially, the to wave the Puerto Rican flag was illegal
Yeah.
at one point in Puerto Rico. There was state mandated American teachers at every school. And they were trying to force all school to be in English, and they were trying to do all these things because they were trying to do to stamp out the Puerto Rican culture. And um, just like Wu Tai, yeah, we were like colonized. A little bit different from Wu Tai because Wu Tai was taken over through force. Puerto Rico was taken over through sleazy means. um, Bit of history for those who don't know. United States gave aid to Puerto Rico in their fight of independence against Spain, and they had their military in Puerto Rico trying to help and doing this war against Spain. Once Puerto Rico, once their independence against Spain, the United States said, "We'll
Yeah.
just stay here, and you don't have a choice." And it's like, well,
Yeah.
neat. So it wasn't exactly like Wu Tai where they were like, "We're gonna battle you and take over you" or whatever, but it was more of like, "This is a nice, this is a
Yeah.
nice place you got here.
Yeah.
I think we'll stay." But just like Wu Tai, there's this spirit of like, we're not gonna lose our culture. We're not gonna lose our sense of being. We're still gonna have our traditions. We're still gonna have, just because we've lost, just because we're a colony, doesn't mean that we need to be subservient to Shinra. And yeah, I bide for your time and all these different things.
Yeah. I don't think there's a lot of conversation around why Puerto Rico is sort of like this pseudo state that it is, as much as, but I think it's important to see how something like a game from 1997 can still be relevant today.
Yeah.
How Final Fantasy IV, right? Another one of the greatest Final Fantasies ever made, with iconic characters, incredible story. Really, that speaks to more general ideas of fascism, of kingdoms, of evil versus good. Whereas
Mm.
Final Fantasy VII is a game with cars, with planes, and it's not like weird alien shit on the moon like in Final Fantasy IV. It's just it's just futuristic. It's just sci-fi. It is
Yeah.
Nomura and the rest of the team incorporating.
I would go so far as steal something from Tim Rogers, another prolific game analyst and stuff like that. I think Final Fantasy VII, there's a case
Yeah.
for it to be cyberpunk. It's a dystopian future where a corporation has taken over practically the whole world. It doesn't have the hallmark outside of Midgard. It doesn't have the neon lights or the aesthetics of cyberpunk, but the story is a very cyberpunky story. I guess it was cyberpunk plus some level of solar
Interesting.
punk, as futuristic as that
Yeah.
is, of like fighting for Earth using technology and fighting against the most punk thing you can do is
Right.
fighting for the Earth and
Right.
being a hippie
Yeah.
kind of
I,
deal, you
I
know.
think that's absolutely
Um,
right. I think there is a great case for it too. It's not like hardcore OG cyberpunk like William Gibson's Neuromancer,
yeah.
um, in which is all just city sprawl. Everything's L.A. or New York City and neon lights,
Mhm.
and it's not like the film adaptation of Blade Runner, the film adaptation of Do
Yeah.
Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, but in Do Androids Dream
Mhm.
of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick, there is city sprawl and neon lights, and then there's parts of that are just catastrophically ruined environs, right?
Mhm.
And the outside world. And I think that's a big part of it too. And I absolutely think there's a case for it. I think it's pretty interesting to call Final Fantasy VII Solar Punk, as I feel like that's maybe giving Nomura a little too much credit, but
That's fair.
I can totally buy it. Solar Punk's great, and
It probably is a hindsight view, just because there have been environment terrorists
yeah.
in the past
Yeah.
before solar punk, so probably it's a huge
I don't think
stretch
it's that huge of a
to
stretch. I
call it
just think
that.
it's kind of it's a funny way to look at Final Fantasy VII. I mean, the
Yeah.
game came out decades after Dune by Frank Herbert, which is arguably just as solar is can be argued to be just as solar punk as something that Becky Chambers
Mhm.
wrote, 5 years ago or something like
Yeah.
that.
Going back and really quickly to cyberpunk, something that you need to put your like I need to put my head into when playing this game is this game came out in a time where 3 CDs
Yeah.
was unheard of, and it was crazy to think how much content is 3 CDs gonna actually be, because when you play the game when it was released, you didn't know there was gonna be anything outside of
Yeah.
Midgar. This was something that was like, that was the first plot twist, right? Like, oh, there's a huge world outside of Midgar. I thought this was gonna be a cyberpunk dystopia, city only. We are gonna be going to like. I wouldn't be surprised if people thought, okay, there's 8 districts. Those are the
Yeah.
eight
Yeah.
dungeons that we
I
go
I
to. It'll be 8 dungeons, and it's
100%, and it's so funny because that you bring that up specifically, because probably the thing that I've heard the most from talking to people who are like, "Oh my god, I loved Final Fantasy VII growing up. That was my favorite game. I replayed it all the time." I always expect them to bring up Aerith's death. What they all every single person I spoke to about it brought up was, I couldn't believe that the game didn't take place in Midgar. And I thought that was the coolest thing, that the biggest takeaway is that everybody's mind had this huge, just like giga brain moment of, this game is so much bigger than I thought. This is what Final Fantasy is all about. Is it still keeps the original tropes, it still keeps this world sprawl, but it has the overmap. And I thought that was such a great experience in the game, especially knowing, like, you never go back to Midgar. That's it. Like, unless you want
yeah,
to. I never finished the side quest to get back in, but once you leave, it's
neither.
over. That part of the game, that part of everyone's life is very much behind. Like Barrett never sees Marlene again in the course of the game that the player sees, unless you go back.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
I mean,
player
they
sees,
do
yeah.
after the end of the game when they save everything, but
Well, we can
okay,
talk about
fair
that
enough.
later.
But yeah, so I just think that, yeah, I mean, it's certainly cyberpunk, and it certainly has this expectation that it's unwinding. And I mean, this is taking place. This was made in the late '90s. I'm curious as to sort of its conversation, or Nomura's conversation, just with other media at the time, of things like Evangelion, Ghost in the Shell, and
Mhm.
other like really titular.
Ghost in the Shell is such an easily huge how's it called,
Yeah,
inspiration for
I mean,
Cloud's
it's got
storyline.
to be, right. Like, I mean, these are titular. I'm sure Akira plays into this as well. where you have these titular
Mhm.
breakout forms of Japanese media that are sweeping that country by storm, and also taking storm across the Western media, albeit not to the same degree that it does now. You know, a new episode of My Hero Academia drops and it has billions of views around the planet, but you know, what I'm getting at is there's a lot going on in Japanese media that is super relevant to Final Fantasy VII, and my image of the scope of Final Fantasy VII as a game in the 90s and early 2000s is warped by being a 14-year-old or 7-year-old to like a 15-year-old when this was all happening. If you don't mind, I wanted to throw some
Oh yeah,
stats out
sure.
there. When I was writing the article, I looked up things about its release. So the game Final Fantasy VII sold 2 million copies in 3 days in Japan. The day of release,
Okay.
January 31st, 1997, it sold 3 million copies in Japan. That's it. It didn't come out in America until legally, it wasn't supposed to, or by rights, it wasn't supposed to come out until I believe
Mhm.
November or October in the United States. And according to sources on Wikipedia, IGN, things like that, retailers were under so much Western audience pressure to get the game in their hands that many retailers broke street date and dropped the game in September
Oh
of
my God.
1997 instead of.
I wonder, for your, this is a homework for you if you don't
I love it.
mind. Could you look at the PlayStation 1 sales graph? Was there a bump for
Oh,
PlayStation 1 sales just
I
because of
wonder.
Final Fantasy 7? Because at one point that was how they were selling it. This was the flagship PlayStation 1 game at one point. Like Nintendo 64 has their Marios and their Links and their Zeldas, and
Yeah,
we have Final
yeah. I mean,
Fantasy. You know?
it. Hey there, dear listener. Your host Jason stepping in here with some of his homework assignment completed. So, in 1997, the PS1 sold 19.37 million units in Japan, 10 million more than in 1996. Arguably, that's because of Final Fantasy VII. However, I cannot confirm nor deny. However, it arguably sold better because of Final Fantasy VII, yet Dragon Quest VII beat it out overall lifetime sold units at 3.8 million units. During this time, the Sega Saturn was crashing and dying, which was the number one competitor for the original PlayStation. In fact, Sony goes as far as suggesting that the N64, rather than being a competitor, made gaming a natural part of a household conversation and improved their overall sales, as the PlayStation was marketed directly towards teenagers as opposed to a family console like Nintendo. An interesting fact, by 1997, there were 52 nightclubs in the United Kingdom with dedicated PlayStation rooms because Wipeout for the PlayStation became directly associated with rave culture. Don't really understand that, but pretty interesting. One of their marketing executives, Glendening, recalled that he had discreetly used at least £100,000 a year in slush fund money to invest in impromptu marketing. All this is from the Wikipedia article, so please feel free to check it up there. So, just some interesting PlayStation facts. Please continue.
Mm.
It's just such a crazy history of reception for this game, and I would be shocked if
Yeah.
it didn't push
Yeah.
consoles over the door. I'm sure it did. I mean, like I alluded to earlier, famously, I believe it was Sakaguchi got into a huge fight with the at the time the current president of Nintendo, because Nintendo announced very unexpectedly to many developers, including Square Enix, that they
Canning.
were going to a cartridge system for the N64
Yeah.
instead of a disc. And Sakaguchi and the rest of Square's team were like, we're tired of making hardware concessions for Nintendo. And Sony said that they're going to do discs. So we're going to do discs. And sorry, Nintendo. And then that started a decades long feud between Square Enix and Nintendo, wherein Nintendo was not publishing anything that had Final Fantasy on it, I think, until it was probably somewhere around Crystal Chronicles and for the GameCube, and maybe
Tactics,
there
maybe.
there was a GBA. There was a whole series of Final Fantasy games on the GBA,
Yeah.
and I wonder how much of that is changing of the old guard and releasing that
Yeah.
versus they were re-releases and remasters of the old games that were originally on Nintendo consoles.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's a pretty incredible just reception. The other stat that I thought was crazy is that by the end of 2005, the PlayStation had sold 9.8 million. The PlayStation version of Final Fantasy VII sold 9.8 million copies, including 4 million in Japan.
Wow. So it was bigger internationally. Well, that's
After over time, yeah, the
wow.
first year it sold. I mean, I think it took a year for the West to get, for North America to get 1 million copies sold. So
Mhm.
and that came out 8 months later.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a pretty.
I mean,
It's a big game.
Final Fantasy, to Japan. Why was I gonna say Japan?
That was not good.
Japan had was essentially did not believe too much. I mean, that's one of the reasons that a lot of Japanese games didn't release in the West, in America, because they just were like, oh, the Americans don't want this type of game,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. This was a very big gamble for them. Like, from their perspective, they're like, do people even want turn-based games in America?
Yeah.
And it paid off.
I mean, it was a huge gamble for sure, and I mean, it certainly paid off, right? But it's just it's one of those I think watershed moments in not just gaming history in the late 90s, early 2000s, but probably in the greater media conception, because I think it had a ton of impact on maybe not a lot of the directors or executive producers of films in the early 2000s, but I think there's a lot of people who had small amounts of creative, like, this is all headcanon, this is all just conjecture, but I mean, it wasn't cool to be into video games up until, I don't know, 10 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
Something like that. Like, it was there's a really great podcast called The Y Button. It's a video game interview podcast. I just listened, I think, the first episode. I'll grab the info on it later, but it was definitely worth checking out. And they were interviewing very famous video game journalist and writer and content creator who started in law and had practiced law for about 3 years, and was found in the break room playing their DS, and was basically told by other seniors, like, you need to cut this shit out. Like, you can't be, like, this is a terrible look. Like, what if a client sees you? Like, this has got to go. And it's like and like, this is happening in the last 20 years. That this is something that happened. This is a conversation that took place. Like, it's just like, for whatever reason, has this huge stigma. And so I don't think in the 2000s you had a lot of people admitting to, I played Final Fantasy VII 10 times and it's the most important thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
And I'm also, directing a movie or something like that. But I do think that it had a lot of influence on just creatives in the 2000s, moving forward, outside of games.
This is a callback to my parents, right? Like, this is like, they were like, video games are not something that you can make a living in. It's something that you just magically happens and appears. Nobody works in these types of things. And if you like,
we're here to tear down Fran's parents. No, I'm kidding.
No, they did.
I don't know you, but you've raised a great son. I'm sorry.
I'll have to tell my mom to watch, to listen, I guess. I wanted to go a little bit back. One of the things one of the notes that I had that I really wanted to talk about was the subdivision of the game, essentially, of like what I feel like are the big sections or chunks. I think there's like 5 big chunks, and I wanted to talk about this when we talked about Midgar, because Midgar, I think, is the first big chunk. That is by itself one thing.
Yeah.
I feel like the second chunk is all the way up to Aerith's death. That's the second chunk. The third chunk is all the way to losing Cloud. The fourth chunk is essentially what we will call fluffing about and getting the big materia, because apparently we need to get these. So I guess big materia
Oh my
the
god.
huge materia, and then the
Huge
last one
materia.
is the Northern Crater slash the rest, like trying to get Sephiroth and all these things. And it's so crazy to me that every
Right.
time we talk about Aerith's death and all these things, that's not even halfway through the game. It's so early through the game, but it's such a huge chunk of the game, emotionally and gameplay wise. Um, and so much so that if you think about it, the first three sections have huge plot twists to the story. Midgar not
Yeah.
being the only
Yeah.
thing in the game, Aerith's death, and Cloud's identity
Yeah.
crisis. And everybody just
Yeah.
talks about Aerith, and it goes to speak. And I would like that one of the things when we were going through these through the cheats and like how you can turn on God mode and all these things, was one of the things I worried about is that a player who plays, there's this movement slash thing about like, oh, all games should have a super easy mode because I just want to experience the story. And I do agree that there has to be an easier mode from an accessibility standpoint. However, video games have a innate sense of making you feel through doing things that other media can't have you do. Like if you may play video games as if it were a movie, you're gonna miss some of the stuff. And the reason I bring this up is because of Aerith. Aerith is the prototypical cleric white mage going to save the world character, right?
100%.
100%. And we can talk a little bit about how that character gets a little bit distorted in her character, but she is that prototypical character, and as such the game really pushes you to having her in your team early, so because she is the best healer slash spellcaster in an early game, other than Cloud, because Cloud is just good at everything. So the game really pushes you to wanting to have Aerith in your team. Like, play with Aerith, play with Aerith.
Yeah.
And my first time, I played with Aerith a lot. She was my strongest character
I also played
next to
with Aerith.
Cloud. So there is not even a story beat to her death. There is a game design, like they were purposefully trying to push Aerith, trying to say, this is your healer, this is the backbone, this is your emotional center, the character that keeps everyone okay, alive, both emotionally and through health spells and all these things. And to take that away from you is not just strong from a story perspective, it's huge from a game design perspective, because now for the rest of the game, you don't have a perfect healer anymore. You can
Right.
kind of have Cloud be a healer. You can kind of have all these characters, but her limit break is a healing spell, a free healing spell for like
Yeah.
and not
Yeah.
to have that is so strong. And I forgot to mention this from my nostalgia story. When I was in Japan working, they had the Final Fantasy VII exhibit. Japan is huge with their exhibits, like their limited time only exhibits. And they were there for like 3 months. I was able to go there, and I went with a friend of mine, and we were going, and it's pretty much each room, there's 13 rooms. Each room is one of the different Final Fantasy games, or I think 15 at this, 15, Final Fantasy 15 had just come out. So each room was like concept art and all these things. And I told myself, I'm not going to cry when we hit Final Fantasy 7. We go through Final Fantasy 7, I look everything, I get a little bit emotional, I don't cry. We did it. We got this. We get to the 15th room, and there's one more secret room. Or not secret room, one more room that they don't tell you about. And I'm like, what is this? You open the door, it is a recreation of Aerith's church with the flower in the middle and the music playing. My hair is getting on end, and I just start bawling. Like, it is such an emotional, like, oh my god. My friend needed to be like, are you okay? Do you need a moment? I'm like, I just need to be. God,
No.
this is probably.
It's a titular moment. I did not expect to get into a conversation about accessibility, talking
Yeah.
about Final Fantasy VII, but this is why it's important to talk about
Yeah.
accessibility in video games.
I am not a diehard Dark Souls needs to be 20, like cannot have any easier mode or whatever. But I do understand that there has to be some room for designers, game developers, to allow a minimum level of difficulty to get their message across. So it's hard, man. It's hard because I really do agree with the sensibility of we need to make games more accessible. But it's kind of like saying we need to make some horror movies less gory because I don't like gore or whatever. But that's kind of like
it's
what some of those movies are for,
I
It's
think
hard.
I think
It's
I want
hard
to table a
discussion.
conversation about accessibility
Yes.
in games for another
Let's
episode.
table
I think
it.
it's extremely interesting, and I think we can bring some other voices into the conversation as well.
Yes,
that
definitely.
are a little bit more expert on general forms of accessibility. That being, just bringing it back to Final Fantasy though, the idea that the game is pushing you towards you putting Aerith in your party just to rip her away from you and make that moment of loss, again bringing back to this sort of motif I have of loss in the game, so much more meaningful is interesting. I don't necessarily agree with the idea that there's a risk of the cheat modes or the god modes taking that away because you don't recognize that she's such a good healer, because healing wind is such an out of control limit break at the beginning of the game that it's hard to, even if you only played the game in god mode, I could see it. But
that was my worry.
Yeah.
Like if a player goes in, they're like, oh, I have god mode, I don't need any healing spells, I don't need anything, I'm just gonna put Cloud, Barret, and Red 13 because they are my strongest players, and I'm just gonna just press X and play for this story. Yeah, I love Red 13 is great. Nanaki. But that was my worry when I first heard of god mode. I was like, my worry is that if this is, people might get the story beats of like, oh, I see why it's so painful. But if you're not playing with Aerith on your team, in fact, if you're playing god mode all the time, Aerith is a detriment because her attacks are weak, her limit doesn't matter.
I don't think, I mean, I'm being a little assumptive here, but I don't think that there's probably many people out there who play the game only in god mode. I think it's probably more likely that the gameplay is fun. Like the fights are fun. They can get a little frustrating, but when you hit the when you hit the bosses, when you hit like your stride, like it does give you a sense of satisfaction in doing it well. But moreover, on this on this point of loss with Aerith and the designers pushing you to get her in your party just so that when they kill her, it's going to be that much more impactful. And you don't get her back. She never comes back. You barely see her again. You have memories of her. You have conversations about her, but we don't really see her. She doesn't show up astrally or something like that. She doesn't show up in the cosmos with Nanaki's grandfather or anything, like any weird shit. Like she's gone, dude. Like it's over. She's gone.
I think she only gets one more appearance, and that's at the very end of her praying.
Yeah,
and that's it. Like
she has a brief moment where you realize that she dropped Holy into the pool.
Oh yeah,
with the clownfish that you can't ever get through.
Yeah.
Anyway, that drove me crazy. But Aerith's death, I think, to me, I knew it was coming, right? Everybody knows that Aerith dies at this point. It's very, very difficult to play the game earnestly in 2023.
Yeah.
Because of that. However, what I will tell you that nobody talks about, nobody brings up, and I was at the edge of my seat, my jaw was on the floor, I was freaking the fuck out, was the part where the game almost makes you kill her as Cloud, and every button you touch is I've never had that experience in a game. I'm like,
moves it closer.
I've played more games than I can count. I've played indie games, little games, AAA, whatever you call it. I that is such a unique experience to me to have this moment where I'm like I don't want, like, I was sitting with my partner, with Aislinn, on the couch, and I was like, she's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I can't stop." Like, there's no, I'm like, touch a button, and she's like, "I'm not killing Aerith." I'm like, I don't know what to do. Like, every button, I'm like, is this how it happened in the game? How does nobody talk about it? I thought Sephiroth stabbed her. What's going on? And eventually, like, Cloud breaks out of it and doesn't do it. But holy shit, like,
Something really quickly about breaking out of it. The person who shouts Cloud's name
yeah,
is Tifa, I just realized. Which shows again that Tifa is like, it has
always.
always been there for Cloud, essentially, like trying, like bringing him back from the brink of
Yeah,
going too far. I guess this is a good
let's segue to Tifa.
segue to Tifa. Tifa, what a great character. Another character that I would say, obviously it's same as Barrett. Woman needs to have big boobs.
Not great
like
visual
90s sensibility.
representation.
Not great.
Here. Little.
Not great visual representation. Little bit exploited.
Maybe a little bit more than a little bit, but yeah.
True. Exploitative. It feels like the artists, or I guess Nomura, were very much playing to the market and to the 90s
100%.
and whatever, and art style and stuff like that. But the writers, I think the writers knew there was more here, because again, Tifa is definitely, like, Aerith and Tifa are juxtapositions of their characters. Aerith is a white mage, supposed to be the dainty princess, and stuff like that.
She's great,
but she's not. She's spunky. She's like, fuck you, I'm gonna do whatever I want, like, cool. Whatever.
Again, another juxtaposition, another subversion of the expectation, right? Cloud's not an edgelord. He's a dweeb. He's a dork. He's just kind of a loser.
Yeah.
Aerith, dainty white mage, prim proper, skirt down to her ankles. She's a badass. She's super cool. She breaks all the rules. She doesn't listen to anybody. Tifa dressed in a tight tank top, a mini skirt. She has these crazy gauntlets on. She fist fights, and she's kind of dainty, and she's like kind of like she's
motherly. She gets
sweet,
embarrassed.
Very
she's
earnest, like super like very matronly, very.
Yes.
Not like motherly, and like it I don't know what I'm trying to say, but she, again, very, very great, very interesting character, because again, super subverted.
If anything, now I'm trying to think about it. So Cloud, nostalgia Cloud, being like subverted for external media. Aerith, same thing. She's super dainty, super princess in any external media. Like in Kingdom Hearts, she's very like, oh no, me, like super like that. I think the only character that goes unpunished is Tifa. Like in Kingdom Hearts 2, Tifa, she's still a badass, like in Final Fantasy VII, but she still is trying to find Cloud because she's worried about him. She wants to like make sure that he's fine. She's just like she's not being like, oh, I'm a badass and I'm gonna Cloud is my husband and I'm gonna grab him by the ear and it's like, go back home. You need to like this horrible like stereotype, right, of like the powerful woman, of like being overbearing on the love interest. No, she's like, I'm looking for him because I'm
Cloud's
worried.
Caretaker.
Like I
I forget the name of the town, but when the life
Nibelheim.
Yeah.
Oh no, that's how.
She's Cloud's caretaker when he's like mumbling in a wheelchair. Like, I mean, and what a stark image there too, of you lose Cloud in your party, and you're like, I don't even know how to play this fucking game. And I was like, what am I supposed to? What do I do? I lost Aerith, and so now I have. And so I had Cloud at least, and I had Tifa. So like Tifa's automatically back in, and I'm like, who am I gonna put in my party? Kate Sith? Vincent? Like, I don't care about any of these characters nearly as much as I cared about Aerith, as Tifa, as Cloud, and then you lose Tifa too, and then they take her away from you, and now you're like, and then they have the whole conversation on the airship, and they're like, Sid, you're our leader, and I'm like, where's my vote? Really? I'll give it to Nanaki before I give it to Sid. Like, real, like, it's yeah. She is this.
Sid is. We could talk. Sid
I
is the
can't
hyper
stand Sid. He is my
masculine.
least favorite character. I hated using
Yeah.
him. I was not impressed with
He
his
is.
limit breaks. They were like, I get that. I'm like, why is he a dragoon?
I like
Yeah.
PG-13 version of him more than
I like Final
than
Fantasy
Final
15
Fantasy
Sid
7
way
version of
more
him.
than I like this Sid.
But yeah, it was like Tifa and Aerith, and I mean that was a huge like conversation of like very obviously very
Oh, it's all
male
gaze.
centric of like which it's all male gaze and everything like this. But here it is.
Oh no.
The time you've all been waiting for. The Giga Brain. I have my third eye opened and I realized because it's always been a question: who is the like true like who will Cloud end up with? And I have come to the realization that canonically, Aerith is Cloud's girlfriend. Canonically, but canonically, Tifa is Cloud's wife. I sincerely think that if Aerith didn't die,
God.
Cloud and Aerith would have started dating. They would have been together, but eventually Aerith would have broken up with Cloud. There's too much. It was a rebound thing. She was thinking about Zack. Zack is too different from Cloud.
Cosplaying as Zack.
Exactly. So I sincerely think, and I really think that it would have been a good relationship for Cloud. Like Cloud would have been able to come out of his shell more and all these things. But I really think that in the end, it would have been an amicable. Like Aerith is like, I really don't think you're the person for me. We're better off as friends. And Cloud would probably be at this point mature enough. Like Aerith has made him mature enough that he's like, you know what? I understand that I'm holding you back. Really, like you want to go off in these adventures and do all these different things, and I'm not really about that.
I resent the only thing I resent in that is the Aerith is responsible for maturing Cloud part, but.
Yeah, it's horrible. That's the story.
I'm personally, if you like, I think that's a hot take. The hotter take is that Aerith, Cloud, and Tifa are in a polycule, and Barrett is also involved, and Vincent's involved, because I think that Aerith and Vincent
honestly
were destined for each other. Because she likes a bad boy, she likes a little bit of an
wait, what?
I mean, Zach's actually kind of sweet.
Zach is the opposite
but he
of
dresses
edge.
Edgy, and I think that she would feel for Vincent's story.
He's a soldier.
My headcanon is I didn't realize this was going to actually just be a shipping podcast, but here we are. Yeah, it's Aerith and Vincent. Everyone's polyamorous with Cloud and Tifa.
Except Kate Sith. Get out of here.
So that has implications that we don't need to get into either. And
fair.
Yeah, they're in a polycule together, but
so I really think Cloud and Tifa are perfect, like are very much better suited for each other. Like I think they're both Tifa is definitely more mature than Cloud, but Tifa accepts Cloud as he is in his immaturity. Like you feel like you mentioned, oh, Aerith is in charge of Cloud's maturing and whatever. And to that extent, I feel like would be the dynamic of that, like Aerith trying to fix Cloud. I don't feel like Tifa would try to fix Cloud. I think Tifa would be support, would be more of like, you need to find yourself. You need to be responsible for you maturing. And I'm here to support you and whatever, but I'm not going to try to change you. I'm not your mother. Like,
yeah,
that caretaking thing was because you were sick and we're supposed to do it like for each other. Whenever the other is sick, we'll take care of each other. But I'm not going to sit around as a damsel in distress and be your mother.
Yeah.
Kind of person.
Tifa and Cloud's relationship is interesting in that regard. I agree that there's certainly an aspect of like caretakership and stewardship of Cloud. I think that's probably his most negative character. Maybe I don't want to say negative,
Yeah.
but it's one of the things that's really hard to parse with Cloud, because on one hand he is dealing with like deep traumas and serious identity issues personally, but on the other hand he's kind of he's kind of in this place of distress where it does often feel like other characters end up responsible for him, for his actions, for his emotions,
for his.
and I don't think that's like that's not a very redeeming character trait. I'm not trying to
Yeah. Which, not to toot the horn of like Final Fantasy VII Remake, I really think that a lot of this is helped by voice acting. There's a lot of nuance in the voice acting of Final Fantasy
I need
VII
to check it
Remake.
out.
Like there's a lot of like lame like grunts and whatever from that comes over from Japanese like media, but there's so many places like just there's a part in Final the part where Cloud fights Rufus on the roof. Rufus on the roof at the very beginning, and he says, "I need to take care of this." Like in the text, it seems since he says, "I need to take care of this," it seems very edgy of like, "Oh, he's a lone wolf and he needs to take care of it." I'm taking it. In Final Fantasy VII Remake, the nuance of the voice acting is so good. Where Barrett touches him on the shoulders, like, "You can't do this alone," and he looks at him in the eyes and says, "Barrett, you guys need to get like you guys, you're gonna die if we stay
I need
here.
to take care of
Please
this."
go." Like he's being like he's kind of like begging Barrett, "Please let me do this alone because I need to save you because I've grown attached to you. I've grown to like you guys. I've grown. You are my friends now, and I've never had this before. So let me do this." kind of deal. And it's like, wow, that nuance is like so nice. It's so nice
I can
to have
see that for sure.
In Cloud, where he's my boy's growing up. My boy's growing. Yeah, Final Fantasy VII
I would
Remake,
like to check it out. I have it on my
good.
short list. I'm hoping to get to it before the next one comes out next year, but my eyes are sorely set on 16 this summer. But anyway, without going too much further, we are at an hour and 43 minutes. So I think wrapping this up in maybe 15 is kind of where I want to be. Keep it at 2 hours because that's enough editing as it is.
Sure.
But so
is there anything big you want to talk about?
My big thing is the perception, right? And we spoke about that. And then also Cloud advertising the Samsung FOMA P90 P900 IVS flip phone. But I think besides that,
oh, we're talking about the future, like what came after
in Advent Children, I guess. So kind of where I left off with my article and where I was feeling sort of torn up and hitting my writer's block is in this idea of loss. And I view the game as an excision of loss and an attempt to work through that trauma of loss. Again, it's the potential loss of your home, of your planet, of your family, of your loved ones, and it's like constantly fighting this tide of how do you make meaning, how do you make sense, how do you heal after you've lost something, how do you heal after losing Aerith? Okay, now how do you lose after losing Cloud? Now how do you lose after how do you heal after losing Tifa? And what does it look like when we get back there? And so I guess where I want to leave this off, and we're not going to do this in 15 minutes, but is Sephiroth a sympathetic character?
Ooh, okay.
Is
like Sephiroth the sympathetic
in
character?
Final Fantasy VII? I don't think that Sephiroth is. So there's two. So to me, there's two kinds of Final Fantasy villains, right? There's Kefka, right? I'm evil because evil's cool and I like being evil. Or like Golbez, like I'm evil because I want to take over the world. And then there's, I think, Sephiroth, who's like, I'm evil because you've left me no choice. I'm evil because I'm now in a position where I have no moves left to make. And or even like Arden from 15 is maybe a little bit more like,
is that true?
Justified or attempts to justify, as opposed to I'm just an evil clown god.
I think that there's too much. Like, what would you say is the inciting incident of Sephiroth for him to be a sympathetic character? Why did he need to do all this?
He was engineered by Hojo he's Hojo's child, or Hojo's his father, and then his mother is Vincent's ex-wife or wife. Fucking crazy. Girlfriend, yeah.
Girlfriend. She dubbed
100%.
Vincent.
Yeah, 100%.
Let's be real here. Vincent is Snape.
I would agree with
Vincent
that. So anyway,
is
Sephiroth's
Snape. He's
basically
just
a genetically altered
Yeah.
being who's been infused with J cells, with these Genova cells, which is an alien that fell to the planet, fell to Gaia, and got uncovered by Shinra. And they're like, "This is really cool. What could we do with it?" And Hojo somehow makes Sephiroth, and then from the get-go, Sephiroth is designed to be a weapon. He's designed to be a tool. And then Sephiroth dies, right? And then Cloud maims Sephiroth in Nibelheim.
Yeah.
And then we have a series of Sephiroth clones that start tearing the planet apart and start causing chaos until main Sephiroth, the one that was killed, I guess, starts regathering them. Killing them, killing himself, gathering the J cells, bringing it back to the northern crater, and then he gets into the crystal, right? So for me, he wants to call Meteor, right? So just to review, he wants the black materia so that he can use Meteor, so he can call an extra orbital planet or asteroid to collide with Gaia, the planet, to force the life stream to react and heal the planet. He doesn't want to blow it up. He wants the planet to react to extreme damage, an extreme wound, by pouring the life force into it, at which point he will absorb the life force and he will become more powerful, maybe become like a god. And for me, the inciting incident is that he wasn't created to become a god. He wasn't created to become evil, and he's not just the Genova cells either. He is at first a human made out of two humans through maybe ill means or unfortunate means, created in a basement, but he is a human who went through the same traumas and losses, who had the same experience of, he had a day job, right? Like Sephiroth's not just like I'm an evil, super cool, like I'm not Rufus. He was a fucking soldier. He was a lieutenant in soldier, and he just was like, I have a day job. I have to work. It's me and Zach, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, to me, I feel like Sephiroth's a little bit more sympathetic than your typical evil character. Maybe this is a hot take. Maybe I'm too far off the beaten path, but I think that he has some redeeming qualities.
If you play Crisis Core, I can see that. But inside Final Fantasy VII, there's a level of, I think this is something that, like, it has to deal with trauma and how do you healthily deal with trauma. I can see the take of it's sympathetic in that Sephiroth experienced a traumatic event, which is the realization that he's a monster, so to speak. And that he was created and all these things. But the fact that he knew that his mother was Genova, even before he came to that realization, kind of goes against that. Like, he already knew something was weird going on, like, with him. Like, there was something weird with him going on already. So I don't consider him a character kind of like Killmonger in Black Panther, where it's like I have no choice. I believe this is the right thing for humanity. So that way, whatever. I think that he went from, hey, if I'm a monster,
I'm going to be the best monster.
I'm just going to be a badass monster with powers. I'm going to be the best monster there damn is. And I think that makes him the rationale as to where he got there. For me personally, it's kind of sad that he went through all this. But at the end of the day, you also have to be responsible for some of your actions. You can't.
When it involves destroying the planet, I feel like you can maybe be responsible for 100% of your actions.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say is that just because you have trauma doesn't 100% absolve you from all sin, you know?
I totally agree. I do not want to absolve Sephiroth. I'm not taking him into confessional. I'm not going to absolve him of any sins. I'm not going to bring him through CCD or anything like that. I guess what I'm getting at is I see Sephiroth more in line with Arden from Final Fantasy 15, who is
I didn't finish that. Sorry.
That's okay. So the gist there is that if I'm recalling correctly, maybe I'm just making this up, but Arden is was amongst the gods in that game, and he was betrayed, he was let down, he was sort of cast aside, and he's pissed, and he's gonna take his revenge out on everyone. All that other shit, all that taking his revenge out on other people, that's bad. And I think we can all agree that's bad. And having trauma does not absolve you does not give you the right to traumatize others by no means. But it is very different from a Golbez or a Kefka or somebody who is so evil for the just to be the incarnation of evil, right? Sephiroth is a character who has experienced trauma. I don't think you can traumatize evil. Like, pure evil can't be traumatized. It does the traumatizing, right? And so this is a character that is unequivocally evil, is absolutely traumatized at the same time, and is committing terrible acts. And that whole thing with Genova is what's so interesting to me, because Genova is this incarnation of evil, right? She is an extraterrestrial being that comes to the planet, and I don't really understand Genova fully. My guess is that she just wants to take over the planet because that's what she is.
I think it's kind of like a virus.
Right.
Kind of like, I think in later
Which
stories,
makes her sympathetic. Right?
Does it?
Is a virus evil?
Virus is neither, I think, good or evil,
And
I
thus
guess.
neither
I think it
is
has
Genova.
no emotions to
and
be
therefore
sympathetic.
Sephiroth's totally okay. He's just a virus. He's like an infected from The Last of Us. He has no control over his actions.
Yeah, I guess, but I wouldn't call that sympathetic. I would be sorry for them, but it'd be like, I don't feel sympathetic for a zombie. I feel sorry that they used to be a life that got, taken over, but I wouldn't I don't know
Fair
if
enough.
sympathetic would be the
Fair
word
enough.
I'd use.
It's a
Personally.
push anyway.
Personally. I honestly, I don't want to cut this down though. I want to let you cook, because I do think that it is an interesting take that I've never heard
That's
of
why
from
we do it,
anybody else. And I'm not saying to do this for clickbait. Oh, look,
I mean, that will be in the thumbnail of the YouTube
No,
video.
I'm not.
100%.
But I do think that it is an interesting take to do it. I also think that Sephiroth in Final Fantasy VII is not that well defined from a... Final Fantasy VII Sephiroth doesn't really care about you. He doesn't really know who you are. He's like, oh, you're just another one of those clones that failed experiment or whatever. And Cloud has this one-sided beef with him because he's got memories about Zack. But Cloud has no beef. Sephiroth doesn't know who Cloud is. Like, he had a helmet practically the whole time and spoke to him once. Like, oh, this is your hometown. Does it make you feel, like, nostalgic? And that was it. Like, that was like a foot soldier to him. Like, there was no connection, really. And that's what I like a lot about Final Fantasy VII in their Sephiroth, how they build up a villain, where they talk about how badass he is, how evil he is, all these things. And something that I do agree the Final Fantasy VII remake does kind of poorly, that they shove in your face Sephiroth, like, too much. Like, oh, this is the villain. This is the villain. This is the villain. It's like, yeah, but it's better if you just talk about him. If you just make him like the boogeyman.
I agree.
Nobody wants to really talk.
He's definitely the boogeyman in Disc 1, for sure. Everybody talks about him. You don't know who the fuck he is. I don't even think you see him for a while.
Yes.
Oh no, you do.
Yeah,
he kills the president.
He
kills President Shinra.
Yeah, but I thought that was off screen.
You watch like Cloud runs up the stairs with the party, and you just see the president being maniacal, and then Sephiroth just comes out and fucks him up, and then flies away.
Is that a? Did you go up the stairs or elevator?
I thought it was the stairs.
I wonder if that's an alternate. Like, I don't remember that. I wonder if that's like if you different.
He does kill him on screen. Maybe I'm just making it up now.
Sephiroth kills what's it called? The president, Shinra. Shinra, yeah, I think I just
Now
misremembered
I'm
it.
looking it up too. Yeah, they get
Why
out
does
of the
Sephiroth?
prison.
I mean,
Mute this.
I see cutscenes here.
You get in
Like,
the elevator. You go through the prison.
yeah, I don't know. I just got Mandela. I think
Uh,
I don't remember him.
Maybe he is killed off screen. I'm like trying to get through this video, and oh, he is killed off
Okay,
screen.
so
You
that
do
one he's
walk
killed
up
off
and
screen,
he's stabbed.
and he's
Yeah.
already stabbed by the sword. Okay.
Yeah, you
For a
go
second there,
up
I
the
thought there was like
stairs,
something I didn't know about. Like there was.
and you get to his desk and you see him stabbed. Yeah, you're right. That I was making that up.
Okay.
That was in my head. My bad. Sorry, viewers, listeners. I'm
It's
I'm
from your
rewriting
universe.
Final Fantasy VII as we speak.
Oh shoot! I just accidentally opened up a new. Shut up! I accidentally opened YouTube. And
I
probably
got some of it
recorded a
too.
bit, so cut it out.
Yeah, that's
Cut it out.
copyright. I'm not trying to get axed. Yeah, so I think I do think it's interesting to see Sephiroth as a more sympathetic character, and I think looking at a lot of the villains and a lot of the adversaries in the over the course of the game, I think many of them are sympathetic. I mean, some of them are not. Like Don, what's his face?
Don Corneo?
Yeah,
Pig.
he's a dick.
I mean, if you want to go that route, like I can listen. There is a case to be made that Cloud was also experimented on, and Cloud was injected with Genova, and the reason he has Zack's memories is that Hojo did experiments on both of them on the same vat of goo and all that stuff, or whatever. It could be a case could be made that what makes us more human and what makes us want to be one with like save the earth and stuff like that is your friends. Sephiroth and Cloud went through similar traumatic experiences where they didn't know who they were and they realized who they were, and while Sephiroth didn't have a support network, Cloud did. So that could be a way of looking at it.
I think that's a really interesting angle to take that from, and I do appreciate it. I think that's kind of what we're getting to with the way we connected with the characters and the party of the story, right? Is that they're so lovable, they're so sweet, they're just so great. Like the party's so fantastic, the ensemble's great, and I mean we barely talked about.
We didn't even get to talk about anyone.
Yeah.
Nanaki, Yuffie, we've talked a bit. Kate Sith, we didn't get to rant about.
I mean, Kate Sith's fine. He redeems himself. I think it's a little crazy of an insert that you have somebody who's simultaneously in the real world and also controlling a doll that's fully sentient, but I'm not going to get into it. I think that Kate Sith is probably the weakest character in the party, and I don't really feel that sympathetic towards him by the end of the game, but I no longer hate him, so maybe that's a win. Nanaki's great. Nanaki's by far my favorite character in the party, next to maybe, I don't know, like Barrett and Tifa and like Cloud, but like I love Nanaki to death. He was always in my party. I think Nanaki's story made me cry more than any. I was heartbroken.
Nice. The Seto story?
His backstory was heartbreaking with his parents, and like I am a sucker for like, fuck my dad, he sucks, I can't stand him, and then like immediately redeem him in like a dungeon.
Realizing,
I'm like, bro. But
so I know that we're coming up at the end here, but I think I have something that kind of books ended because it's the last scene of the game. You mentioned that Barrett gets to see Marlene at the end of the game, like after they save the world and everything.
I don't remember.
Well, yeah, that's off screen, but that's because until more media came out, the end of Final Fantasy VII is actually unknown. They talk about how they don't know what cleansing the world is for the white materia, that it could kill off all humans. They talk about that, and at the end, after defeating Sephiroth and everything, you don't see any more humans. Shinra is in shambles. You only see Nanaki and his children, or who we expect to be Nanaki and his children. So there was a huge debate when it came out, actually, of is humanity dead? Is the story of Final Fantasy VII that at the end of the day, humanity was too much of a blight on this earth, and they
Hmm.
were wiped out? Maybe
I think
something like that. So
that's spooky.
yeah, so you mentioned that, and I wanted to bring it up quickly because that's something that it is one of those Inception endings or Last of Us endings where it's like, oh my god, like it drops like, oh my god,
What is
I
it?
don't know who did, and then afterwards they kind of ruined it by being like, oh no, it's of Advent children, oh no, they're just Cerebus, oh no, all these different things where no,
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
everybody's
That
fine,
just
it's
was.
okay.
Nanaki lived for 100 years.
Kinda,
He had 2 kids, and eventually Midgar fell and got covered in plants. But that's then
yeah,
that's where Stray takes place in 2022. Um, Stray,
straight.
the
What
cat
is?
game.
Oh, the
Yeah,
cat.
yeah. But anyway, so that was Final Fantasy VII for me and for us. I loved it. I really did. I had a lot of
Mm,
gripes with it, but I think that just means that like you can't interact with a form of media and not have like some commentary on your experience.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
especially this
old.
old.
It's made for a different age. I definitely recommend it. I can see why people say it's the one of the best, most goated video games of all time. I mean, I think for me the biggest takeaway for our dear listeners is we that you can still find very important reasons to interact with and play Final Fantasy VII and likely the remakes now too, because it's
Yeah.
still telling an extremely relevant story. It's still a story about eco-terrorism, about standing up for what's right and doing things for the sake of your friends and for your family in the face of extreme odds and unbelievable evil. And I think
Mm,
what makes Final Fantasy so great is that it can tell this story with like really beautiful fleshed out characters in a way that Final Fantasy I think really struggled to in the past. And having played many of the prior
yeah.
games, 4 was extremely sympathetic with its characters. I believe 5 and 6 were as well, but I think 7 really takes it to a whole new level of, and maybe that's a function of it being three-dimensional, even as archaic as it looks now. We didn't even get into the graphics, but I mean, beautiful game, exceptional gameplay for many. Don't get too attached to your material loadouts, and you'll have a greater experience than I did. And yeah, I just think I think it's absolutely worth revisiting today. And like just to really bring it back to the beginning, we talked about how far we play games. I think if I replayed this game, I would probably get as far as Aerith's death and then put it down.
Yeah, probably. I probably would also get there. The 2/5 through the game would probably be where I would get. The story is great, even beyond that, like Cloud's identity crises and stuff like that. But it isn't as emotionally impactful as Aerith's death. And Section
Yeah.
4, as we mentioned, kind of a slog. Huge materia portion is kind of a slog. You're kind of just doing that to finish it, essentially, to finish. Like, it feels like they're finishing the fight for the next like 10 hours when it's
Yeah.
just like, no, just make it 1 hour, just
Yeah,
cut that out,
that was
just
definitely
go to
a
several, and
weaker
that's
part of
it.
the game.
I agree with everything that Jason said. The only thing, not disagreement, but like, I guess a bit of disagreement because Jason hasn't played the remake yet. You kind of have to play Final Fantasy VII before
That's
the remake,
that's a really important
unfortunately.
takeaway.
Which is very, very unfortunate. I think that I guess this is my hot take about Final Fantasy VII Remake. As much as I love it, Square Enix was given a once in a lifetime opportunity here to just release the exact same game with updated graphics and just print free money, and they decided not to do that. They decided to actually change things and build it from the ground up, which is both admirable from an artistic standpoint that they decided we don't just want to retell the same story, but at the same time, unfortunate that Final Fantasy VII is so dated when it comes from graphics and ease of use and all these different things. Because I really do think that there is still a room or there's still a huge market for just re-releasing Final Fantasy VII with new graphics and with quality of life things for a new generation. So yeah, Final Fantasy VII remake, you kind of have to play Final Fantasy VII original to get. You're gonna be more confused than not.
Full
It's
Metal.
kind of like watching Brotherhood without watching the original Final Fantasy, Full Metal Alchemist. Like, if you want the true experience, you
I,
kind
on
of
the
have
other
to
hand, will disagree
watch
and say
a
that you
lot
can
of Full
absolutely
Metal
watch
Alchemist
Brotherhood
before
without watching
Brotherhood.
FMA, but that's a different podcast, maybe a different episode of this one. I have heard that you can play the remakes without it, but I will say that
Yes.
I think playing through the first disc at the very least of Final Fantasy VII is absolutely worth it if you can't bring yourself for the whole game, given it's about 30 hours. So it's not a huge commitment. It's not Persona 5. It's not 125 hours, but it's I think the first disc is at least worth the play.
That is so interesting. I think I agree with that. I think
Right.
if you play, since we haven't seen the whole of Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy, definitely you just need
And
to play the first disc,
the re-released
I think,
versions like of the original game on Xbox, on Switch, they will tell you when the disc swaps. It will like prompt you to switch discs, and then it'll just make a save file and just it'll do the work for you. So you will definitively know that you've gotten to the end of a disc.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm looking forward to having a discussion about Final Fantasy VII Remake and as to whether you will stand by that or not.
Yeah, well, I will. I look forward to it as well. So let's wrap up.
Sure. What's the next game?
Next game is right now I'm currently playing through Banjo-Kazooie. And I'm playing through Final Fantasy. I'm playing through The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time 3DS.
3DS, interesting.
I am a firm believer that the unequivocal way to play that game now is on the 3DS. But that being said, that's what I'm playing through right now. I'm trying to do 2 at once because I fell behind on my schedule because after this I will still have like 18 games that I have to finish by the end of the year, and some of them are very very short, and then others are Final Fantasy 6. So I may have bitten off more than I can chew. So the next game we're going to talk about is probably Banjo-Kazooie.
Okay.
And I might audible and make it Legend of Zelda if I feel more strongly about that. But currently I'm feeling more strongly about Banjo-Kazooie.
I will play that game. I'm interested in seeing how a collectathon game replays now that we have games such as Mario Odyssey and A Hat in Time, which A Hat in Time is so good.
I think that if your experience with Banjo-Kazooie is anything like mine, I had a very, very drastic misremembering of what that game actually is and how it's played. It is a collectathon, but it is not. It's great, but it's not Super Mario 64. I'll say that.
Wow. Okay. Well, I'll try to play it.
It's much funnier.
And
though.
if I can't fit it. Oh, it's much. Well, I mean, Conker's Bad Fur Day creators, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
They were trying. They were getting there.
They were getting there.
Well, yeah. If I don't know if we're gonna release this one before we record the next one. Maybe we should just record a few of them before.
We'll probably just record.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. And where can they find you, Fran?
I guess I have a Twitter. I guess at FO Martin. I should probably now post more often. I'll try to write more on my blog. There's some technical stuff in there right now. And whenever I'm making an independent game, I'll let everyone know.
What's the blog?
It is Juegos Fantásticos at blogspot.com. I'm pretty sure that's it.
I think that's .blogspot.com. Sweet. And do you also stream
on
Twitch?
Right. I do stream on Twitch. Thank you. L_Fantástico. Because Fantástico was already taken, and that person hasn't logged on in the last years. So, yeah.
One day we'll get him. We'll get him, folks. Yeah, so check out Fran on his Blogspot on Twitter or on Twitch. Right now, I believe you're playing through Valorant. Playing through it. Yeah, he's trying to get to the end of Valorant. I heard it's a pretty long
Honestly,
game.
At this point, now that I've hit gold, I might switch focus and play more Banjo-Kazooie or Ocarina of Time. Because I'm like, gold was such a slog to get to.
if it makes you feel any better, howlongtobeat.com lists Valorant as 550 hours to beat it as a completionist, but only 92 hours to beat the main story.
I can't tell if this is a joke or not.
I'm being dead ass.
What
I'm
does that
100%.
even
If you
mean?
go to how long to beat, I don't know. We'll find out. We'll find out next time on Dragon Ball Z. But again, I'm Jason. You can find me on Twitter at Dancing Frog Game. You can find me on Twitch at Wobicon, WOBI_KON. Or you can find me at my blogspot, which is probably the easiest, or my WordPress, which is useyouritems.wordpress.com. Thanks everybody for joining us.